So welcome to the Organic Advisor Call Series. I'm your facilitator, Nate Powell-Palm, and I'm a training specialist with OATS. This series is brought to you by OATS, the Organic Agronomy Training Service. And this is our 7th episode. Please join us on the OATS website to see our past calls and our upcoming list of topics. If you haven't done so already, I really recommend signing up for the newly launched Organic Advisor listserv. We'll be having some great conversations right in your inbox on all things related to advising organic grain farmers. And the link to sign up is going to be in the chat. Please stick around after the show, and we're going to have some really exciting announcements for upcoming OATS programming. And that's just about it for housekeeping. So let's get started with today's discussion. Our guest today is Amy Bruch. And Amy is a 6th-generation farmer and president of Cyclone Farms, an organic family farm in Nebraska. She has nearly 20 years of experience in agriculture, including agricultural business management, regulatory compliance, operational improvement, and transitioning farms to new crops and to organic production. And I have the pleasure of serving alongside Amy on the National Organic Standards Board, with Amy heading up the Certification, Accreditation, and Compliance Subcommittee. So I'll start the conversation off with my questions to Amy, but we hope you all join in and put your questions in the chat box, and I'll read them out to Amy and we'll get them answered. So thank you for joining us, Amy. Really excited to have you here. I was hoping you might be able to kick us off with a little background on your journey, how you discovered certified organic farming, and just some highlights about your current operation.
Certainly, Nate. Good morning to you. Thank you for that warm introduction, and thank you for letting me participate today. Good morning, everybody. Sure. My journey to certified organic production started, about a little over a half decade ago, actually, closer to 10 years already. But soil health is really the vehicle, the conduit that brought me to farming organic. My husband and I, we were able to, and fortunately able to, farm in many different places. I spent 6 years farming in Brazil, production ag, conventional production ag, and had opportunities to work on projects in Africa. And the main vehicle that I believe that allowed for me to jump zip codes and farm was soil health and that intentional soil balance. And we brought that methodology to our own farms, my own family farms, which are a century old in Nebraska. And when you are working on soil balance, you realize that some of the inputs that you are commonly using as a conventional farmer really aren't necessary anymore. If you have healthy soil, there's a lot less inputs that you're actually going to need to apply topically. So we kind of found organic agriculture indirectly through just healthy soil and conversations with our soil scientist, Neil Kinsey, with the Kinsey Albrecht soil health program. So that is how we got brought into the organic world. And it's just been a warm community. When I first entered in, the one story I love to tell is that, every organic farmer was so welcoming. Everybody shares their game plan with you. It's a very transparent system. Everybody has a different game plan. We always like to share our trials and tribulations. And that was just so refreshing to me because in the conventional space, it was a little less transparent with farmer communication. So I just really love that aspect of organic farming and just networking with other producers.
Absolutely. I like that you touched on soil right away, because I think that is an under-celebrated part of why organic is so exceptional. Could you tell us a little bit about your current farming operation, what crops you grow, sort of how big you run, and what you're looking to do in the coming years?
Sure, certainly, Nate. My family operation is in East Central Nebraska, and we're completely irrigated. We were growing conventional seed corn. We're in seed corn country, being in this part of the neck of the woods, but we've totally converted our whole operation, about close to 2,500 acres, to organic or transition to organic crops. We have branched out, but I try to stick with risk management principles to our insurable crops. So those are lining more or less with alfalfa. We grow a variety of different corn, food grade corn, blue, white, and yellow. and we grow tofu, soybeans. We've grown in the past sunflowers, wheat, milo, pulses also. So we would love to grow a variety, love diversity, but again, trying to stick to more risk management principles and at least have the ability to break even if crop failure does happen with weather. So that kind of limits a little bit of the diversity on our operation at this point in time.
Absolutely. So you've transitioned a bunch of ground to organic fairly recently, all things considered. Could you tell us a little bit about how you think about the transition process, or what you could share about what went right or what you wish you'd known when you started out in transition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the transition process, that was good. It was humbling. It was good. But anyway, I've learned a lot, and I probably do things a little bit different if I was starting out right now. But transition, I always advise people also, you try to pick some of your healthiest parcels of land, because those are the ones that are going to transition easier. There's if you can treat your soil, there's a few more tools, I guess, that you can use to solve problems prior to transitioning. And when you're transitioning, then you have to follow all of the rules of the organic program. So that is really important to note. So starting with that healthy soil first is really important. Right now, is a great opportunity to incorporate in transition if you're in the Midwest or even in the western part of the country or eastern. Alfalfa is a really great transitional crop. It builds soil health. It helps mitigate weeds on the front end and really sets yourself up for fertility in terms of nitrogen, mainly for following subsequent crops. So that's a really good crop to leverage during the transition. And some of the other solid seeded crops are really good as well. If you are capitalized and have some additional equipment options, then there's some other row crops that you could transition with. And that's what we ended up doing, was starting off with corn and soy through our transition. But again, if it does work and you have markets in the area, alfalfa is a really good option through the transition.
I love to hear that. I think that's something that we we sort of undersell when thinking about how do we get through transition. We figure out how do we make enough money to keep the lights on, as it were. And alfalfa always seems a little bit precarious. But could you tell us a little bit more about were you raising alfalfa before you went organic, and how do you think about the alfalfa market or the alfalfa as part of your rotation?
Actually, prior to transition in organic, we were not growing alfalfa in our area. I do see a little bit of it coming back. I think right now, from a conventional standpoint, with the high commodity prices, unfortunately, a lot of people have gotten out of alfalfa. So they've really converted some of the land that was devoted to alfalfa into raising corn and soybeans, I believe, just to capitalize potentially on some of the higher prices that are happening in conventional corn and soy. So I think multi benefits, there's an opportunity there for organic producer transition to organic to see one, soil health with the alfalfa play and transitioning with alfalfa, and two, with just a monetary avenue to it's a crop that people need. Unfortunately, there's really sad stories of producers that need alfalfa right now with a lot of the drought, and there's just not enough going around. So it could be a win-win for producers to leverage alfalfa, one, to help facilitate the transition, and two, to really satisfy needs of other farmers that are looking for alfalfa. So it's a good combo play.
And so how have you found alfalfa markets? How did you work that selling point out?
And that is a big one. The market is really challenging. And that was one of the reasons why we didn't at first go into an alfalfa transition, because our market access was pretty limited. However, through conversation, through network, through actually, you can look at the organic integrity database as well to find producers that are in the organic dairy market that may be in need of alfalfa. So it's a real multi-pronged approach. There's message boards on social media also for hay exchanges. We also leverage an online auction when we did have hay available that we just, with some faith, decided to put our products on an online market, and that actually connected us to a network of buyers that we started developing a relationship for. But it's a real multi-pronged approach if the outlets aren't, within an hour radius of your home.
That's really interesting that you mentioned the Organic Integrity Database, because that does have every single organic operation in the country. So really all of your customers or potential customers are right there. So that's brilliant. Given your rotation and selling hay, I know selling hay can be a concern for some producers because it's such an export of nutrients. How do you think about maintaining the soil nutrient balance and not quote selling hay and selling the farm?
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point, that there is a lot of removal rates with what an alfalfa can do over time on your farm, but there's a lot of contribution as well. So it's kind of you just got to look at the big picture and boil it down to nutrients. And alfalfa actually is a good thing. I've heard several times with producers when they are in rotations that may not include alfalfa, that they actually get in a corner a little bit with high P and high K, so potassium and phosphorus, and then potentially calcium as well. And that happens with litter applications over a long period. And there is a way out of balancing those higher nutrients in your soil, and the solution is actually alfalfa. So I look at it as a helper to try to keep my nutrients in balance versus a detriment. So it is a solution, I think, to folks that potentially have maybe a little bit higher P and K in their soils. Also, just as you were talking about, how do we manage it from a nutrient removal standpoint? That's at the end of the day, it just kind of becomes math, and then looking at those long-term complementary crop rotations. So it's a strategic play, and it's not a one-year battle with organic production. You look at it on a long-term basis, and we are annually doing our soil samples too. We have electroconductivity mapped our whole entire farming operation, so we can then know the soil polygons in our fields and the similar soil types. And then every year we take a pulse rate of our soil through soil sampling of those similar polygons, which when you do electroconductivity map and do that base calibration, then essentially on a quarter, 160 acres, well, at least in our area with minimal soil types, we are able to deploy maybe 4 to 6 soil tests per farm to get that information, so then we can make that correct plan every year.
Do you bring in any nutrients or any fertility as part of your rotation, and how do you manage that import of nutrients?
Sure. No, that's a really good question. So in addition to robust crop rotations, we do bring minimal amounts of soil fertility into our equation. So what we're doing is we do apply some poultry litter. We have the ability to split apply that. So that's very helpful. So we don't have to put all the base load of nutrients on at once. We have a spreader that's a high boy apparatus that we can top dress litter. So that helps minimize leaching or anything like that happens with litter. So we try to put the right amount of that in. We do feather meal from time to time. And also the only other real nutrient that we've had to apply is through the Kinsey Albrecht soil balancing that we're doing. We're not only balancing N, P, and K, we're balancing some of the micronutrients. So we have through showing soil deficiency, have got approval to put naturally mined micronutrients on our soil that are OMRI approved. So those would be manganese, zinc, boron, and sulfur at times. So we do that. We aren't into foliar applying nutrients. We're into just balancing the soil and let the soil feed the plants mentality.
Could you describe a little bit more about how you think about your rotation? You mentioned that diverse, robust rotation. How do you think about your sequence? Say you've just finished your alfalfa run out of transition. What would you then go into next and kind of follow that with?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, nutrients is one piece for building those robust crop rotations, but it's also the strategy of weed management and disease and looking at your sequencing of when you've planted crops. For example, not necessarily after alfalfa, but peas, you're going to plant them every 5 years because there's innate disease potential with peas if they're planted more frequently. So your question was with alfalfa, it looks to be that you would plant corn and from a fertility standpoint, I think there's a complementary synergy of planting corn after alfalfa. I actually leverage soybeans after alfalfa just because of the weed management principles and benefits that alfalfa can provide to that crop. So it's a more of a tangential benefit, I would say, than a fertility complementary benefit. So alfalfa than soybeans, because the desire then would be a few less weed management passes. I'm always trying to optimize those weed management passes, either through trying to develop ways to intercrop, cover crop, et cetera, while we're growing our cash crops, or, just these solid seeded crops such as alfalfa or a wheat, and then strategically deploying a soybean right after that to hopefully mitigate weeds a little bit more naturally. And then looking into those, since you have a couple of years of alfalfa and soy, a couple of years of nitrogen building type crops, then looking to leverage a nitrogen consumer such as a corn or a wheat, because wheat, it requires more nitrogen than you think, actually, in terms of our operation and just the nutrient requirements for wheat. We really see those as parity just with nitrogen consumers, wheat and corn. So
Wow.
yeah, that's something also to just think about. So there's planning your rotations, one based on fertility, two based on your weed management strategies like I was mentioning, and then three based on what potential markets that are out there. So it's kind of a threefold thought when we're building our rotations.
That's fascinating that you talk about planting soybeans after alfalfa. We had our guest last time, Leah Varick with the University of Wisconsin in Rodale, noted that as well, that there's that weed suppression optimization when you take advantage of the post alfalfa cleanliness of that field, and then you're putting more nitrogen in. So love those through lines. When you think about building your rotation, how have you gone about finding and deciding on that third year crop? Not your soy, not your corn, but that pea, wheat, or other crop. What considerations do you like to look at?
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good question. It's that thought process with the soil health, the complementary rotations, trying to not have grass crops back to back, because generally grass crops are those nitrogen consumers, and then that's when the multiple annual litter applications begin, and that's, I think, that's the prelude to potential soil imbalance when you're leveraging back-to-back litter applications. So just looking at those types of factors, as well as factoring in the market and then crop insurance. I'm such a proponent to try to expand what insurable crops that we have in our area. I think we have the potential to grow a lot more crops in our area, and I'd love for that to happen. I think that probably everybody can really resonate with that. Unfortunately, we're trying to not necessarily go backwards too much financially. So we're kind of constrained with what risk management says that we have insurable crop attributes on. I've done the FSA NAP program on crops that we do not have or that we don't have RMA and crop insurables against. I've done written agreements, and unfortunately it just happens in our area where we receive a lot of hail and wind, that's
Mhm.
really detrimental if I'm not able to at least have kind of a minimum guarantee in case hail and wind come our way. So I'm working very hard to develop more options. Our options are pretty limited at this point in time with those third crop options. Oats is something that I can grow for a feed market. I don't necessarily have crop insurance for that, but I have grown oats before. Peas, I don't have crop insurance for that, but I have considered them just very strategically. And also, popcorn is another one that we do have
Mhm.
insurable attributes for. It even though it's a corn, it does have less nitrogen requirements because at the end of the day, it's only going to be yielding approximately, equivalent to like a 50 bushel type crop. So, the demands on nutrition and nutritional removal isn't as high. So that can be definitely a strategic play. Seed corn, I do get into that as well, that do have insurable attributes on, and that also requires less nutrient demand as well, because the equivalent bushel with seed corn is about 50. So there's those options. I've tried to bring in canola in our area. I think it's a big product that's imported into the U.S. It's organically. And I think there's a real opportunity to grow it. But again, it's just trying to get that insurable attribute um, component into the equation. So I'm trying to be extremely defensive, I guess, with some of the deployment of my organic plans, just to be able to be whole and make this a sustainable type production method for my family farm and think of the next generation.
Absolutely. We can't have sustainable farms without sustainable farmers. So I really appreciate that viewpoint. When you transitioned to organic, what was your strategy for learning about the differences in crop insurance and risk management? How did you think about that, and what tools did you use or mentors did you tap to learn about it so you can make your farm via risk resilient?
Mm-hmm. Then that's a really good question. I've actually, the organic integrity database was a good first step for me as a beginning transition farmer, to just network with producers, and then going to different conferences was another. Um, Unfortunately, I did a lot of living through experience, and then having a weather failure, crop failure due to weather, and then understanding, what the caveats were with the current insurance mechanisms. So that was another way. I learned the hard way. I
Mhm.
don't have a PhD at the end of my name, but I feel like through education, I maybe should have indirectly earned one, just with the farm education and lessons that I've experienced. But anyway, yeah, there's been that. And then just really networking with crop insurance agents, crop insurance adjusters, reading the RMA manual, the different excerpts, and then just also hearing from other producers what works and what doesn't. And then, ultimately our program, is just trying to make sure that we can. I think there's a lot right now going on with the administration and trying to help producers and help organic farmers make that transition, make that leap. So I think there's a willingness to maybe solve some of the barriers to entry, and to build that resiliency. I think through our agronomic techniques, we're building that resiliency on our farm, but sometimes those techniques cannot battle the big 5-inch hailstorm or things like that. So, there's some other solutions that we also need to deploy besides soil balancing and soil health for ultimately getting to the other side. So,
What sort of challenges have you had educating crop adjusters or the folks with whom you're working on insurance products as to what organic is, how it's different, how are you selling it as something that folks should become aware of and understand what products are available to farmers?
mhm. Yeah, I mean, when I'm having conversations with adjusters on my farm, after weather events, we have to leverage what's written in the rule book at the time. So it's just, having those conversations of what's in the current rule book for adjusting standards, and then what are, the things that potentially might need to change. And I try to make a little list of those, and then just benchmark with other producers if they'd be beneficial or they're isolated incidents. But yeah, those conversations with producers are invaluable, because I think each of us go through different scenarios, but if we can look at the top two, top three challenges that producers are facing, and then try to make improvement on those through policy, because crop insurance is something that we're going to have to change through the Farm Bill, not necessarily just requests. So it's an official process. So if we can aggregate our voices and come up with some of the top priorities, I think that's the way to really make movement on that piece for producers. And I'd be curious, to hear. I see there's quite a few producers on this call that if that's a challenge in their area. I see it being challenged in our area, the Midwest, Iowa, Nebraska area. So, we want to make sure that we're working on the most relevant things for producers. But yes, sorry to
Yeah,
take a sidebar into crop insurance, but I really feel like it is an important component on these robust crop rotations. I think producers really want to grow a lot of different crops, and we're a little bit limited sometimes with that. I know there's the whole farm policy that does work for some producers for crop insurance to make those additional crop choices on their farms, but I think ultimately we gotta change it through some policy as well.
Yeah, I think that leads right into my next question. When we're thinking about why are we still at 1% of US land being certified organic? And how do we grow that supply of organic grain? What are your thoughts on what is holding farmers back? What holds your neighbors back, or folks that you've worked with as a consultant? What holds them back from making the dive into organics?
Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, a really good question. It seems like it shouldn't be, when we look at what the Midwest, what a US is as a producer, we produce in abundance. We're a net exporter of a lot of these grains that we're a net exporter of these conventional grains that we are a net importer on from an organic standpoint. And it is just mind boggling to me. It is a different way of farming. I will admit, it's a paradigm shift when you make that transition, and the thought process that you use to be a successful organic producer is a different thought process. But I think, the barriers to entry are crop insurance for one. I would say I'm not order ranking these, but that's obviously the first one that comes to my mind. It's very challenging to lose your approved production history that you've worked so hard to build if you're a conventional farmer, and then get that cut into potentially up to 50% of your approved production history when you decide to do transition, and then you build this history, and then when you finally get to the 36-month anniversary window, you get your organic tea yields given to you, and you're resetting and restarting again. So that floor is extremely challenging to overcome, to build up that history, and it just takes time. I think capital needs are also a barrier. So the finances, if you're looking to try to convert acres, there's that question, how many can I convert at one time, and what's the economic benefits? What's the reality of equipment? When you're spreading equipment over a certain number of acres, can you justify bringing in equipment if you're only converting one farm? Those are real questions, and they do set you back. A cash flow is a big one for me. When I was a conventional farmer, everything was sold within 2 months of harvest. When I became a transition organic farmer, everything sold about 2 months before I harvest the next crop. So I'm holding on to it for 12 months. And then you buy inputs 6 to 12 months in advance. So essentially you're working, you need to have good bankers, not necessarily for the actual capital involved, but just understanding the cash flow and when your expenses hit, and then when your income can hit, because it does spread quite a bit. So just the cash flow for one, and then the sophisticated equipment that we bring in. I'm an engineer by trade, and I love technology, but it's balancing those solutions to just either one, gain deeper insight on your farm from a technology standpoint, or two, I deploy them from a defensive standpoint so I can mitigate some of the weather risks. So if we get into a rainy spell, which it unfortunately did not happen this year, we were incredibly dry, but if we do get into a rainy spell, those are the times when I try to deploy tools such as a flamer or a propane flamer, or an electric weed zapper. So it's just deploying equipment to try to get that consistent result at the end of the day. And the consistent result at the end of the day with variables that we can control our weed management and fertility. So that's another barrier to transition. It's just incorporating some different pieces of equipment into your operation. And then I think thirdly, it's just, finding that network and support. You don't want to feel like you're on an island. You look down the road and nobody's farming organic or transition, and it can be tough battle until you get that network. And then once you get that network, you realize that people are facing the same things as you, and can help and support you through the process, or help you brainstorm for different solutions. So I think those are some of the top barriers I would think that people are facing. Those are the ones that I face, and there's several others as well.
Well, I'd like to touch on that point you made about capital. I think it's oftentimes folks who have long time relationships with lenders are asking their lenders to make a fairly big leap when they might be the only organic farmer in the bank or in that lender's portfolio. How did you educate your lender about what you're doing? I know anyone can Google you and see you are not shy about yield ambitions. You're really hunting exceptional yields. And so how did you get your banker on the same page as to what organic is and what it could be, with their support and their cooperation?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, you're right. I have a philosophy that if you have good yields, the quality of your product is really good, because that means your soil health is really good. So to me, it's a challenge, and it's an exciting one to be able to almost independently be the agronomist on your farm, to see where your imbalances are, and to mitigate those, and then it's kind of an offshoot is the yield, I think, when everything is right below the surface. So how do we educate our banker? That's good. We have a great local bank, and we deal local, so we can have these conversations, so we can do show and tells to our farms, so we can bring them out. We call them our honorary CFO. It's a position on our farm that we don't have to pay for, but they're ingrained and involved in our operation, to the extent that they know our finances inside and out. I think that transparency has helped build a long-term relationship. So when we build it, this is what it's going to look like, but we have these plans built out 3 years in advance. It's great to have a sounding board. It's great to have somebody that doesn't understand your operation, so they can ask those tough questions to make sure that your calculations are accurate. So I love that partnership that we've been able to develop, and it's just been through constant conversation, education, because we are the first operation that the bank has worked with that is organic. So it was another relationship building process that we do so much of that in our organic career, which is exciting. We build relationships with other producers, build relationships with our input suppliers or offtake agreements, and yes, with our banker as well, and our neighbors. When we're dealing so in close proximity to each other, it's good to have those good relationships with your neighbors as well.
How would you say your bankers feeling out about organics after working with you over the last few years? Are they on the hunt for more folks to go organic, or what is sort of the organic temperature in your neighborhood?
The organic temperature, I'd say at a banking level, it's really interesting. We've been able to have conversations throughout several. Our small bank is a part of a bigger family bank. So there's several bankers that we've been able to reach and touch. And one comment actually came yesterday. It's just if a producer's a smaller producer and they have a son or daughter that's wanting to come home, the banker has been unfortunately having some tough conversations with the family that maybe this isn't possible. However, now with the organic vehicle, they can think, that size of operation can actually support 2 families, 3 families, etc. One, there's an incredible amount of labor that needs that we have on organic farms. I feel like there's a factor of 3 at least, within terms of labor, equipment, etc. So 400-acre farm probably farms more like 1,200 acres, depending on your crop rotation. So there's that piece. There's more roles in an organic farm. It's not just the labor piece. There's the the physical labor piece. There's the business management side of things. There's the developing the relationship piece, a little bit of marketing. So there's a many opportunities that all of a sudden open up within a farm, amongst other things. So I think the bankers at the end of the day, that wasn't our main driver to explain organics to them, but they also just thought, wow, this is a solution for a lot of families wanting to bring home their son or daughter into their operation. So it was a really positive thing. And I think the positive comes through education. Sometimes it's not necessarily always understood, unfortunately, with our neighbors and things, but it from an outsider looking in, I think that maybe they see organic as not a good fit. But when you can break down the barriers and have those conversations, I think there's an excitement that we've been able to generate with some conventional producers. Some of the guys on our team just love being in equipment, and if you're a conventional producer, you're not in equipment that much besides planting and harvesting and maybe a couple applications in the middle of spraying or whatever. But as an organic producer, I mean, you're living in the equipment. So if you love to be in a tractor, this is a really good place for some of those people. So anyway, it's just trying to appeal to, there's so many aspects in our business. I think there's always 1 or 2 things that can appeal, to anybody. So it's just finding those gleaming, shining stars and making those connections.
So in putting a few of the pieces that you talked about together, the crop insurance is going to be a big one for trying to figure out how to keep folks whole during the transition and then not punish them for going organic by losing that crop history for their base. When you think about if a producer comes to you and says, I want to go organic, how should I get through transition? I've been approached by quite a few different food companies who say they want to buy transition crops like oats or any of your food grains, and they want to buy it for a little bit of a premium. As we discuss that role of alfalfa, that is going to give us the best chance for arriving in certification clean with well-fertilized soils. Do you think that there would be a role for food companies to support farmers' alfalfa ambitions during the transition with some sort of per acre payment or something, in anticipation of buying their organic food grade crops, helping with that transition in a way that's not so much asking the farmer to try to just struggle through and not prepare as well as they could for being organic? What are your thoughts there on the role of helping transition farmers weather that, if companies are interested?
Yeah, I really like that question, Nate. I think that that's important, and it's a thought that I've had too. I mean, I briefly touched on the administration, but I think the private sector is really the ones, that benefit from producers growing organic products. So to get them and pull them into the equation from day one and understand, our transition organic, it's it's a very clear process in terms of here's the window of transition, and then here's when a producer will be organic. So yes, I think bringing those offtake agreements, bringing those CPGs, bringing those companies that are interested in growing their portfolio of organic products into the equation closer to the farmer level, and through that support, I think is great. I think coming up with real solutions is really good. I'm happy you found some transition avenues. I think that's good. And in our neck of the woods, the transition avenues are more or less in the non-GMO world. And, you know, those are the challenges, I think, for transition producers, because, you know, we hold those. I mean, some of my products right now are transition non-GMO crops. I still have them in the bin for the 2021 season. So getting a 10 cents, 15 cents a bushel more, but holding it for 9 months with a risk is not a real solution. So we need real solutions for producers that are growing organic, with the anticipation, like you said, that they will be organic, you know, after that 36-month period. So alfalfa, I think, you know, there's now's a great time. There's a renewed focus on soil health, balance, you know, just all doing the right thing on our farms, kind of farming the way in which our grandfathers farmed, you know, and some of our fathers as well, but really gravitating to those agronomic solutions. I think companies are really interested in that story right now. So I think getting those conversations to happen makes a lot of sense. And the alfalfa world, there's a lot of nutritional derivatives for the pet food industry, you know, if you can pelletize it. So, and then that's an easily shippable type product then, instead of working with the bulks and the masses of these bales. So, you know, there's some innovation that can really happen around alfalfa as a whole that I believe is not, you know, several decades ago, there was an alfalfa mill, you know, generally in every region. Now they're few and far between. So, you know, maybe rethinking that equation, rethinking how we deliver our products is going to be really important to reduce our carbon footprint and again, to make it easier through the transition for people.
There's two things that you've said that have really got me thinking about the environmental impact of organics. One was the cleaning up of high P and K in soils. I think a lot of discussion that I've heard about, you know, the integration or rather the impact of confinement animal agriculture on farms is that we have a ton of manure being applied in a smaller than ideal area because it's expensive to ship. And how do we mitigate that? So when we look at the recent announcement for funding for climate smart agriculture projects, it would seem that the integration of alfalfa to start cleaning up a lot of these fields would be right there. And then it results in this really easy transition into organic. So perhaps some of that money will flow to the farmers who are interested in tackling that. In looking at the other challenges of infrastructure, what would you say are some key catalysts that you think it would make it easier for farmers to chew on the idea of going organic? Mentioning just the general alfalfa market, like having a mill nearby that's going to be pelletizing it, or a good buyer group. Are there other infrastructure pieces that you feel like on a regional basis would help catalyze and make a safer bet the transition to organic for most producers?
Yeah, you know, looking at transportation and packaging is a big deal, is a big thing. When I'm looking at, you know, our bulk type commodities, I think always having the leanest supply chain that we can with organic bulk commodities, and that's probably the wrong term for them, but those are the grains, the row crops, corn, soy, and wheat and those types of crops. You know, we want the leanest supply chain that we can to connect producers with their offtake, their end user, just so that the two sides of the equation benefit the most. And then if those two sides benefit, then the consumer benefits. So if we can make lean supply chains, that would be better. Having, you know, I think in terms of infrastructure, storage, cleaning, et cetera, has really been important vehicle on our farm. And those that brings in technology too. So when we're putting up bins and we try to do the identity type preserve process, grain bins are a real important factor, but then having the right airflow system, designing them that you can eliminate risk to store your grains, through the hot of summer if possible, if your offtake agreement can't handle them, to, closer to when the next harvest is happening a year later. Sizing the fans appropriately, getting that internal insight from technology systems, bin manager type systems that can efficiently run the fans, and capitalize on the dry days or capitalize on the cool days. So you're not using as much energy as what you need, or to dry down or to get into that ideal moisture. Even bringing in cleaning equipment, sorting equipment, doing some of those unit operations that we rely on third parties to do, bringing in that technology to our farms, I think can make us a little bit more robust and insulated in the future. Just re-looking at, I think, transportation type situations as well, where if we bring in some of this infrastructure to our own personal farms, I think it does make a smaller carbon footprint too.
Yeah. And so as folks are thinking about how to best advise farmers interested in transition, it seems like looking at adding the most value you can to the operation. And so kind of starting with a food grade choice of the different grains that you'll grow, and then moving into possibly selling cleaned or toted grains seems like the direction you're thinking. A progressive organic operation would be moving to capture, $30 a bushel for wheat rather than $16 a bushel as that finished outgoing good. That's great. Yeah. So when we think about this $300 million that's going to organic transition, what would be those top spends that you think would help grow the number of organic farms, but grow them in a way where they're going to be resilient and ready to last once they cross the finish line into certified organic status?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's quite a investment into the sector, which I mean is a great thing. But again, I hope it's delivered to real solutions, and real solutions, I believe, just help synergize that entrepreneurial spirit within the organic farmer. I think when you're an organic farmer, that's a spirit that you do have. You're looking to basically be a lot more independent as a producer than maybe what a conventional producer is. You're making the solutions, the decisions yourself. Just I think as we talk just with infrastructure, I think that's a big thing. I liked your hierarchy, the way in which you summarized that, looking for top quality. Top quality comes from, that soil balance that you have. So it's just tying that together. If you're really excited about soil balance to minimize some of the disease and insect pressure that you have on your farm, then there should be some wins on the backside when you can grow that crop and hit those food grade type markets. And then, like you said, integrate some of the actual value add piece. I mean, as much as we can value add or vertically integrate on our crops, the better. It does take time, takes resources, it takes knowledge, but this a part of this investment into transition could be the right vehicle that we need to make that go. I think we talked pretty in depth on the risk management type policies. I don't necessarily think we need coupons to make the current risk management policies cheaper for producers. I think we need them to be a little bit refigured, make them just reflect actual production capacity. And then I think we need to integrate these quality adjusting standards that are specific for organic grains. We need to have the manual recognize organic production and the differences. And when I say manual, that's a risk management manual. We need to have that rewrote to recognize the differences within growing organic crops. When we get hail at a knee-high corn stage and we lose that canopy, there are real expenses and challenges that an organic producer faces versus a conventional producer faces at that time, and that's what we need the policies to really help, in addition to the tea yield disparity that we have. I would also say, just, this has been a great session for me to participate. I appreciate the invite, but having real conversations with producers, I think some of that money needs to really be facilitated one way, shape, or form for more of these type formats. I think I learned the most through conversations with other producers that have lived and breathed this type of farming. And I think there's a lot of value. You can empathize and sympathize with if you've been there and done that. And I think there's a lot of value when you only get one crop a season, or potentially two, depending on the area that you're in. We really need to learn from each other, because we maybe only have, who knows, 30 tries at this, 50 tries at this, and we want to learn as much as we can every year and not repeat, the challenges and tribulations that others have faced. So I just think there's some kind of form. I don't have it figured out how, but I think there needs to really be an investment in these types of networking opportunities here that we're doing today.
Oh, I love that and appreciate that call out. For folks who have joined us over the last 50 minutes, if you have any questions for Amy or anything, happy to have you unmic, or just throw the question in the chat. I know we have a Montana farmer on here, Casey Bailey, and he's a big alfalfa person. So if he wanted to jump in with some anecdotes about how he thinks about alfalfa dry land in those dry prairie country, that would be awesome. But Amy, I was hoping to ask, as you look towards the potential of organic, oftentimes something that knocks organic is yield. And I wanted to get your philosophical take on what should organic producers expect for yield, and how close should organic get to conventional as far as expected agronomic improvement? Where should our goalposts be?
Well, it's a great question, Nate. You asked so many great questions. I'm a big problem solver, so I think organic farming is a way that we solve the problem, solve the root cause, find a solution, and then catapult from there. So maybe this is just idealistic, but that type of methodology and thought process, I think, can yield way better results than trying to solve problems through Band-Aids and maybe chemicals. So that's maybe a little bit of a harsh statement, but just in general, that philosophy to me is exciting and challenging, and it shows that we need to use our brain power collectively, our agronomic skills, to really come up with solutions to drive yield improvements. I'm friends with the gentleman that conventionally has grown really great soybean yields and has won some records through soybean yields. And his comment was, the soybean yield potential is, he says, over 1,400 bushel. So then when we looked at, conventionally or organically, our yield to that, what if that's true or not, but it was pretty aspirational. If you do everything right, I don't think that we've untapped, what the yields should be. So we need to look at, when you open that bag, you say you just start subtracting yield instead of adding yield to your crops. But I love organic farming because, to me, it's not just seed dependent. I won't get a yield because I grew a certain seed. I think it provides farmers with the ability to just really showcase their skills, showcase, a collective approach that's taken years and years and years on their farm. So I love all attributes and aspects of root cause problem solving, and then the advanced agronomics that go into growing a crop, and then all of the variables that come into play, that some are in our control and some are not in our control. But I'm really positive with what organic producers can do. I've seen it on my farm, I've seen it on several farms. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but I don't think people should necessarily think that there's a threshold that we can't overcome just because we're organic.
And so if I hear you right, you're not only saying we're going to hit parity with conventional, we're going to exceed conventional.
Well, as farmers, we always have to be optimistic. So that's what gets us working every day. But anyway, I think there's an opportunity. I really think there are. That doesn't mean that we're there yet. Doesn't mean that we've hit it. But I think that we should set our sights on real aspirational type attributes.
Absolutely. Well, again, anyone, if you have any questions, really appreciate everyone joining us today. This is, I knew it would be, but it's been a great conversation. So thank you so much, Amy, for your work in agronomy, in farming, on NOSB, and as just an expert that is really trying to solve some of today's modern problems in organics. So as we look to the future, we're going to be announcing on oats finally a very exciting thing. We've been talking about that we have upcoming programming for several months now, and finally the organic field crop course is being launched for advisors. So that is live on the website, and I'm going to drop a link in here. And this is the full hybrid course that's been sort of the focal point of oats programming for a while now. And so as we think about the last bit I would want to ask you, Amy, is what advice would you have for advisors, folks looking to help organic growers or conventional growers thinking about transitioning? What is that? What hand-holding or what advice would you have liked to receive from an organic advisor when you're getting started out?
Oh, that's a great question, Nate. Let's see. So advice, I think it's just a dynamic plan, and it's a customizable plan that you have to be able to convey to producers. However, you think about the big picture, I think the plan can really be, if people can understand the big picture of what they're trying to do and then work backwards from that, I think that that's some of the best advice that I had. E for effort. Just because you go out there and do something doesn't mean that you're going to get the result that you were hoping for. So that intentional thought, intentional effort, whether you're setting up your cultivator, whether you're setting up your flamer, whether you're setting up your planter, it's just that really spend the time that you need on the setup, and then I think you'll be able to execute a lot better. If you rush through that setup, I think then it's just not going to go well. And I think another comment would just be the value of the soil balancing. I mean, it's kind of a long path to change some of the imbalances in our soil, but over time you will see that benefit. So just like organic farming, when you start transition year one, you think, gosh, it's going to be a long time before I become organic. But when you're in year two, you realize it's right around the corner. So if you start now, the years to improvement actually go quicker than what you give it credit for. But I think it's just starting on the right foot as quick as you can will build those bigger results in the end.
So get some soil tests when you walk on that farm. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Don't be shy of the data. Yes.
Right.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're very busy, so thank you for your time, Amy. This has been really great. For everyone, our next call is going to be October 19th at 8 a.m., where we'll be discussing strategies to profitably integrate livestock into organic cropping systems. So I hope to see you all there. All right. Thank you, Amy, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Nate. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.